Overnight, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke made further comments about the state of the US economy. Effectively, he said that the recovery is going to be modest to moderate, and this reflects a cooling off period which has happened over the last 6 months or so. One of the key aspects of this is the fact that manufacturing and retail sales in the US have actually contracted. And while employment has actually grown, it hasn't grown enough to actually remedy the significant proportion of US citizens who are out of work, that number staying at around 8%. However, investors' moods were actually raised overnight. Investors had been very concerned about earnings from large American corporations, primarily driven by that 6-month cooling down period. However, investors were pleasantly surprised, as a clutch of results were reasonable, and that actually lifted the mood of pessimism. On the other side of the Atlantic, however, the International Monetary Fund followed up its comments on Monday by a relatively stinging attack on European leaders, who it says need to do more in terms of propping up those ailing European economies. The IMF says that the European leaders should contemplate further cuts to interest rates, as well as bond buying programs to reduce the cost of bonds for those ailing governments. So looking at markets then, a good night on markets overnight. The US market, the Dow, was up by more than 100 points, and most European indices were also up by around 1%. In terms of currency, the Kiwi continued to strengthen against the US, and reversing trends over the last couple of days, was also up against both the euro and the pound. We were relatively flat against the Aussie. Over the last couple of weeks, I've talked a lot about dairy production in the US. However, tonight I'm going to focus on production out of the European Union, which is of course a significant producer and exporter of milk products too. According to figures recently released by the European Commission, milk production in Europe is expected to increase by around 1.5% to around 154 million tonnes in 2012. The European Commission also expects an increase in productivity in the 2013 too, up around 0.7%. Interestingly, this is against a backdrop of contracting herd numbers, which means effectively this additional production is coming from higher yields per cow. The actual mix of products being exported is also expected to change. Whole milk powder production from the European Union is expected to decline, primarily because it just can't compete against the same product produced in Oceania. On the other hand, skim milk powder is expected to increase, driven primarily because of demand in China and, surprisingly, North Africa. One of the key things, though, is price. European farm gate prices have only just dipped below the 2011 levels, so the current decrease in international prices has not really been felt there yet. It will be interesting to see whether, if those trends continue, it does have any impact in terms of those production forecasts.